Oni borong ating may kinasal ni kakamburag na radio fijuan do mo ibiti na buwang kani venano ngon na ngaw na pang madawa da urungo din sal ni kakamburag ngo kana sarra via FBC TV na Vakekeli. Na nonda ngaw na kabi nai and the kinda batalitunga na wuni lawan nonda matintu na Minister yang garabati una vika bang lawan nonda matintu Mr. Ayan Said Kayum may pito manitalitunga na nona walislesi o salaseni ki laite na tumanda na tiko salaseni menangai tumantalitiwa ni pamadala membele tiko na nonda constitution bo sene avuni pa bulma asamu itabudi en madam sauti wekim ni kanta na borong tiko mai na radio fijuan erani uni tarumai nda bo nuna ni roti ko na lewa rauna wande otiko rawo boita bisara bole ban kena wande otaki na nonda avuni pa bulma bo na keni labelabe wekim ni na be turu ndo na keni labelabe na keni bosa boita okay esa tambaki tu na nisibia ba na singni kuwa au na vule ndo na numni labelabe ni pepa ni singni kuwa e tigo loma ndo ni labelabe ni avuni pa bulma bo sena constitution bo ama itabodi en mother south in the navina am the sakinda wati una turanga na attorney general na buni law na matinto Mr. Sayed Kayum na nonda ngunu ni Vakekeli kana ba madalati ko na kamembaleta na nonda ya uni babula bula bina to you Mr. Minister can you just briefly explain to the listeners on Radio Fridge 1 that the new constitution has been launched last week and where can they get a copy. And we now know that it has been translated also in the vernaculars. As in today's paper, we've got the translation in the Itaukei language. Bula to you, sir.
Well, thank you. Thank you for having us on the show. We, as you know, launched the Constitution last week on Thursday, where we had a briefing for the media, and then we had it for all the NGOs and civil society groups that had made a submission. We had invited political parties and also the diplomatic corps. As you rightly point out, for the first time we had translation of the Constitution in such a profound manner in both the two major vernaculars. And the President, His Excellency, our President, is to assent to it on the 6th of September, where there will be a ceremony where he assents to the Constitution. The Constitution is also available on the government website. Anybody can go and download it. We also hope to, once the President assents to it, make pocket size of the Constitution available, so everybody can carry it in the top pocket or in their handbags. And it's available, like I said, on the website, but we also have printed copies available. You can go to the divisional commissioner's offices. You can, obviously in the Fiji Sun is printed today, which is free, and you can get that. But the idea is to have it as widely disseminated as possible.
Ia wekim nene kanda na warong ati mai na ngau na waro taki na Vakekeli rango dina sali ni kakamburag na Radio Fridge 1 ka sarra vitaliti na FBC TV wani pa madala membaleta na nonda avuni pa buli mabu na new constitution na vuno na rani teru mai kina kanda na mga tiko nda pa bina ni sabo wande o takitu na bosa bo iteuke ka vesureti nonda ngau nungo muni alvinak ni turu ndona kini lavalabi ni wilika na veka itu membaleta na nonda ilavalabi bo ni avuni pa buli ma sena constitution sa tamba kitingo sa visula kitu rau ni nda turna keni lebelabe me pa sa mama da latiguna na turna bunilewa ena nonda ngau na boru tekengo ena ngau na boru tekena Vakekeli ndola talanga na taliboni ki kimni ni be tarumai ena nonda ngau ngo ena tolu ruro saiba dio na rau tolu ruro saiba dio saibondua na vitu tolu ruro dio na rau kena vitu tolu ruro dio saibondua be kimni ni sabili koti na nonda buni bobulewa ni na be tarumba sona kai tukina nda bobuna ni tiguna turna bunilawa Mr. Sayed Kayum ka batalanga kina wana ngonele au maina nona buli bolbol o sala iti utalanga ngo na roni na boma dal talitingani rona ngai biu bugi tigo batake I laniata ena kena sangai me boma tatagi tigo bikimni na ka memboleta na nonda ya buni wa buliwa so maybe the Itaukei people are now asking the protection of Itaukei land. Is it entrenched in this constitution?
Sure. Just before I address that, one of the reasons why we also put out the translations much earlier before the President assents to it is that we want to get people's feedback in terms of the vernacular. Because the English is out and the Itaukei version is out also. And sometimes the translation from an English word or English phrase to Itaukei, there can be some confusion. So as you rightly pointed out, we've got Laite and Sala from the AG's office who worked together with it, with the Ministry of Itaukei Affairs to get the most accurate translation And we want people's feedback on this, so we get the right meaning, so people, have the accurate representation of whatever is in the English language. The Constitution quite specifically, and unlike ever before, protects Itoke land and recognizes the ownership of Itoke land. But even before that, I'd like to highlight that in the preamble, there is the recognition that the indigenous or the Itoke people of Fiji have ownership of their lands, of course, and they also have a unique culture, unique customs, unique traditions, and of course their language. In the same way, we recognize the indigenous people of Rotuma, because in the submissions that we had as we went around Fiji, some of the Rotuman people said they had been missed out. So we recognize the unique culture and traditions and customs also, and we recognize the indentured laborers from the Pacific Islands and British India who were brought in, other immigrant settlers, and their practices also. But of course, it's not unique. Only the indigenous people's customs and traditions are unique because they're indigenous to Fiji. Nowhere else in the world you have these practices, put into effect. Under Section 28 of the Constitution, there is a specific protection that says that no Itoke land can ever be permanently alienated. In other words, you can't ever buy it, sell it, transfer it, grant it, with the view that you take it away from them forever. You can lease it, which a lot of people are doing at the moment, but the ownership is still with you. So that protection is there. And secondly, what it also says, which we've never had, should, for example, Itoke land be used by government for public purpose, like in all countries in the world, sometimes a land may be required to build a road or a jetty or, a reservoir. If government needs to firstly pay the Itoke landowners a fair compensation if they want to use that road for a public purpose, like building a road. Mm-hmm. But if government no longer requires that land because, for example, that road is too narrow now, they want to build a new highway somewhere else, they have to give that land back to the Itoke landowners. Now, that provision was never in any constitution we've had. And as you may recall, we had discussed this. The Prime Minister earlier this year made an amendment to the law where we said that the land needs to go back to the landowners if the government no longer requires it. This is now given constitutional protection. And like I said, it's never been put into effect, and this should clear up any of the fears people may have about the ownership of land and security of the land. Because the idea is that we keep on, at the very least, maintaining the pool of land that is owned by the Itoke landowners. Previously what happened was sometimes the government used to acquire Itoke land for public purposes like building a road or whatever it may be. As soon as it did that, it used to sit in the state land. And then sometimes that was converted to freehold land. This constitution stops that from happening. So that's one of the biggest protections that's ever been given.
Ia vekim ni kada na vor ngoti mai me buka saborita ti wan turana buni law na Attorney General and Section 28 ni nonda buni bo bulunga sa tambagi zartunga kina kana tango maki vinagatu na kamembalata na tango maki ni nondangele na Itoke. Ina wara kina no mningiri ti mai ena ndo to manda na nonda dingulalaka ena ngona waru tango na Vakekeli. Ni warnga tiu mai kina salini ka kamura in radio Fiji wan dumu ibiti na bongani venenu hona waruta kina Vakekeli. San dola tigo vikim ni kanda na warnga tiu mai na kana dola vina taliboni tolu ruro sai pa dio nan rau tolu ruro sai pa dio sai bonduar nonda bulang tigo na buni lau nonda matintu Attorney General aya Sayed Kaimu ni sambula kimni
yo wili kiasa lamasa
naga wili kiasa no militaru
ni bulag na ka ritualesi wa bulu talanga bero nonda ro talitak nontong mun di Vakekeli kena biarkan wango ni monit ni bula Mr. Attorney General sir.
How are you?
I have a question for you, and my question will be, can you please thoroughly describe the voting system that is enshrined in this new Republic of Fiji Constitution.
Sure.
Let's Vilkes from Lambas.
Okay. Okay. Thank you, Willie Kesha, for that question, and thank you for that question. It is a new system, and I'll just highlight some of the key features of it. What we are saying in the new constitution is that because of a lot of the feedback that we got during the consultations, a lot of people were saying that they feel left out because they may be in a remote part of Fiji, that the policies that the parties put in place, or for example, if a member of parliament, say, is elected from Ba, he may not be necessarily concerned about what's happening in Lau or Vanuatu.
Right.
So the idea was to put in place a system where Fiji is no longer broken down into all these different constituencies or even along divisional lines, but the entire country is one constitution, or one constituency, I should say. So you have 50 members in parliament now, as opposed to 45 that was in the draft, so it's now increased to 50. And if you want to stand for parliament, you have to go and try and win the support of everybody throughout Fiji. Whichever political party wants to put up candidates, they have to go and try and appeal to everybody. So in that way, we build a national policy for education, not just education for people in Suva or Mba or Vanuatu, but everywhere in Fiji. So in that way, it brings about unity within the country.
Does this mean, Mr. AJ, that a person has to be well known all over the country? Or?
Yes, I think they have to appeal to everybody.
Okay.
The political party manifesto has to appeal to everybody,
Mm-hmm.
and on that basis, people will choose candidates. This is practiced in Israel. Israel has a single country as the constituency. It is also practiced in Netherlands. Now, in this system, to put it simply, you go and choose one person to vote. And when they tally up the votes, apart from tallying up the individual votes, they will tally up how many people in that political party got the vote. So if in one political party they receive, say, 50% of the votes, they will get 50% of the seats in parliament. That's what you call proportional representation. We, of course, will have massive voter education on this once the Electoral Commission is all set up to explain to people exactly in detail. But that, in a nutshell, is how the system works. The entire country is one constituency. Your political parties have to appeal to everybody across the board. You, as a member of parliament, you simply, if you're walking down the street, just because you're from Ba, it doesn't mean the person from Vanuatu can't come and tell you about his or her problem. You can also listen to their problem.
Binaka, ni sampula kimni?
Ni mula binaka.
Ni mula binaka.
Da sangana tarwe mula lao.
Binaka.
Tani liu duangana matulutu via wandurulutu viti mai wandurulutu nga. Kajes nga wanduria. Indem bena lao sanduri mera ni indikevi sana matulutu bora ya mai viti.
O krem dengan edam ni?
Oh, Simeone, Botukola.
Simeone mai Botukola. Simeone mai from Botukola, sir, is asking about religious organization that has been set up. Is there anything in the new constitution regarding religious organizations being set up?
Yes, there's a provision in the constitution that talks about your right to practice your religion. And that provision is there, which is section 22. In that section, it says that you can practice your own religion, and of course, people can practice their religion in private and in public. So, for example, if your congregation wants to go and have a prayer meeting at the National Stadium or wants to go in the park, as long as you get the permit, you can go and have your prayer session there.
Simone is asking about the new ones, people who want to set up new religious organizations.
Yeah, absolutely. There's not an issue with that. I mean, you can, whatever, there are different denominations. There's no restriction on that. You can say different denominations can be set up, but you obviously need to ensure that, for example, if you're setting up a religious organization and you want to register it, needs to go and get registered through the Office of Ministry of Justice. But in terms of ability to practice it, it also, Section 26 also talks about how the people can organize themselves in a congregation, in a church group, and you have all the ability to do that. You can also set up schools along religious lines. You have the ability, if you're a denomination, you want to set up a school, you can also do that.
Mi takasimi ni sa somina nomni Watataro. Me paka sa pamadal tatiwan turanga punilawa. Me paka ni sa tutalanga tambagitu en dundonu ni non vondure endua. Na matalutu eve waite vikina me paka tuene avuni babulewa. Ni sambula kimni ne damni ken uno ningiru mekina. Nimbula binaka.
Good afternoon.
E para mo krem ni vosota e sing ni matata sartu mena numni taro ni tobole talamanda mai vondo e para ma. Eparama Fromba is talking, or is asking if the protection of for natives, if anyone wants to change anything about the indigenous or native, is there anything in the constitution?
Yes, just to put it into perspective, in the 1997 Constitution, for example, the way that we've set out the protection for land rights, and also you will see that in this Constitution, we also have an exception to the equality provision, where we are saying that the customary practices that give ownership rights to Itoke, Banaban, and Rotuman people, and also the bestowing of chiefly title, this under Section 26(9), it allows for that to take place. So in other words, the customary practices are allowed to take precedence over the equality provisions that exist. Secondly, in terms of the protection, you cannot amend any of these provisions unless you amend the Constitution. And the way to amend the Constitution is that you need 3/4 of Parliament to agree. And after that, you need to take that amendment to the public, to the voters. And 3/4 of all registered voters must agree to the amendment. That's a very, very high threshold. So you see, in the 1997 Constitution, it was 2/3, which is less than 3/4, in Parliament and also in Senate. But they could do it themselves, but they didn't have to take it to the public or the voters. In this, we've put the check to say, for example, the Parliament must approve 3/4, and also then the voters must do it. Now, obviously, in a practical position, from a practical perspective, Itoke people will never say or vote and say, take away my land. I mean, that's the check and balance. That's why we take it to the public. And 3/4 of the voters must agree to that.
E parama sa sumiti kuna nomni Watataro, en nonda ngaunongo, en ndua talamanda nonda dhingu langalaka, en ngauna waruta kina Vakekeli. Ni borong tiu mai kina sali ni kakamura ni radio fijuan dumu viti na bonga ni venen en ngau na waruta kina Vakekeli asara vitalanga ni FBC TV nonda bulang iti ko na bunilao nonda matin tu Attorney General Mr. Syed Kayum atalang kina na ngone leo vingra vitalanga na bunilwala ni bunilao nonda matin tu sal ni ata kau na kiri ko manda mena rauni na wande otangi ni bikim ni pomimbi na taruni para maimba na vika sa pa madala otigena na turana na bunilao kinda bagi sala talitima nonda ngongo nimbol binaka
Nimbula vinaka. Kanga saba madal taka chukuna dauni lawa na nonda ndondonu na Itoke. E sabir kutor toka na abuni bakubule wango. Keba kame ndona tiki na mebesa utaki e ana rauninga ibisa utaki ngana palimendi. E mena bandonu ya tolu mai na kabae ni leo ni wili ni palimendi. Gai mena bandonu ya talanga na leo ni bonua, irna leo ni bonua era bola yada. yangana wale roni na visu tekina iyo esa toka na yabuni bagbulewa na kena tango makibinaka na dondon na ito okay.
E para ma uklani sana matate be kimni ne ba madala me ka wandi otati go sal mai na nona bul na bunila na matim tu sambulo kimni ya re sangol tali na kanda tolu roro sai vadio na rau tolu roro sai vadio sai bandua e vitu tolu roro dio na rau kene vitu tolu roro dio sai bandua e rani vingom kina no mni vata taro na ngona varuta kina Vakekeli ne mbolo vina kimni
yo vil kastan galamba sai
vina vil kasa no mni taro
Mr. Iji, sir. I shall remain in election. I think under this current constitution election provision, I as a voter, I'm inquiring in regards to the polling ballot paper in which we shall be making our vote. Can you just briefly explain how will the polling ballot paper looks like at this stage, or the mechanism at each early stage? Can you explain it to the member of public who are listening, or you're still in the current position to finalize this? I'm just inquiring as a voter, what will be my ballot paper looks like when I come under this new voting system. Thank you, sir.
No, thank you for that question. I think a lot of people do want to know that. But I think the main point is what's in the Constitution, and that is that you have one vote. You make one selection through the entire country, by choosing anybody you want from the country, and you can choose the individual member. You don't have to tick for the party. You choose from somebody from any party that you like. In terms of the other finer rules, that'll be in the electoral decree. Now, generally what happens is that you may, at the moment what is being envisaged is not been finalized, for the practical basis of voting, you may go into a polling booth and you'll have all the names there. So it may be up on the board. So you may have, say, 50 names from each political party. So if you have 5 political parties, you'll have 250 names. You need to choose one. So it may simply be a question of you just writing down the number of the candidate that you want. And that's all you do, and you put it into your box. So that would be the way it's done, as opposed to having a very, very large ballot paper, in which you have all the different names. What we also want to do is come up with some innovative ideas, and that is to put photographs of people next to the names. So you know fully what it is, who you are voting for, what policies they are, but also you can put a face to the name.
Naka vilikasa sa sumitigana nomni vota taru ni sambula kimni?
Yo ratole se par matana.
Vinaka para nomni taru?
Taro tiko na matavile wai. Matavile wai reni visha utke ka ndo na ka challenge sa kembali pikenda. Nitoke. Pambimbi ne volni kaambula. Ne baleta na ngone adoptati susu. Na rauni visha utaka na rauni zuru kina volni kaambula. Baleta tukuni tukuni singra ni zuru kina volni kaambula. Siko na provision. Ne baleta sikina ngo. Tarang kere rutum romo tana marame ro madalkin na bali.
Naka pram. La roni ni bebo ke mandane bom.
So the adopted child, they can be in the VKB or not?
Yeah, he's asking if the court can change anything regarding indigenous children to be included in the VKB.
Okay, and what the Constitution says is that there are certain, and I'll get you to turn to page section 26, which is the equality provisions. And the equality provisions, it says that there are certain laws that will always prevail over the equality provisions. And that's in respect of adoption, marriage, devolution of property on death, and pension. And also, like I talked about, how it says that the customary practices of bestowing communal ownership of Itauke land. So in other words, the VKB is always used prima facie as the list that sets out all the owners of the land, of that particular Matangali. So that's a recognition of that. Now, number 2, the law of adoption will also prevail over the equality provisions. And that's what the courts will always enforce. In the same way, for example, we have said that there should not be any unfair discrimination on the basis of sexual orientation or gender. That means that just because somebody is a homosexual, we should not discriminate against them. But it does not mean that we allow for same-sex marriage, because the law of marriage prevails over that equality provision. So I hope that answers this question, that the courts will enforce the adoption laws as it stands. We are not changing those laws.
E param ni tani sana somotona nomni watataru ni sambula kemni.
Yo, nimbula binaka.
Nimbula binaka nomni taru.
Alamo penyasi mai sinatoka.
Naga penyasi nomni taru.
Aya, o ulitingo na laba kabiti dikuan. Na section 39 na lao mai na re bakatalai bakapitali na tamatayan do ay tuwan nundo de ko bakatali mai na no vai simbasulan go e bautalan kina na koro mato bakapia ngo ndo bakadortu mai na ndela ningele listaki kedi karua e tambu bakala wa me bakatalai bakapitali ndo go vada po na ndona viwa chini tutunga la pona wa china le la stali tu ndona wa marama ngai bakatalata ni wa china bakamau chuo talenga na ko ni longo.
He's talking about section 39. Yeah.
What is the question regarding section 39?
He's asking if in that section if people can remove or chase away any person from a house, and does this law applies to the village too?
Okay. What it basically says that you cannot simply go in and remove somebody from their house.
Yeah.
There's protection against that. Of course, for example, if somebody is living in the village, there are the customary practices of that landowning unit that's applicable. So that's decided through the customary practices. In the same way, for example, if somebody is a tenant, now the tenancy laws will prevail. So a lot of people, for example, lease land from Itauke Lands Trust Board. So what the Constitution says is that the lease is what you are governed under. But Itauke Lands Trust Board can remove somebody from the land if they have not been paying the tenancy rent.
Mm-hmm.
So that's allowed under the tenancy agreement. What this is there for, Section 39, is just to specifically ensure that nobody is removed from their house illegally. It says arbitrary evictions from his or home and have this or his or home demolished without the order of a court. So they're different, it applies to different circumstances, but this is an overall protection to stop people from coming and just, removing you. For example, if you have a tenancy dispute, the dispute needs to be settled through the agreement. There is a mechanism, 21 days notice, whatever the case may be. In the meantime, nobody can come along and just simply take you out. In the same way, if there's a dispute in the village, there's a dispute mechanism. So you need to finish that. In the meantime, whilst you're trying to sort it out, nobody can come by night and just remove you if you're already going through a dispute mechanism.
Maybe Sala can just translate. Sala ni wanda utamada na itu untuk sahawa.
Iyo, ni ndareda na tikina tolsangul kadhiwa. Sabak matatek chukina ni etambo bakalawa me ndona tamata me vakatalai mai na nona vale, se memba suraki na nona vale. Ke senga ni vakaroti mai na mata vele wai. Ke sa chuko ndona vele lati lom ni kor, mena va muringa na vele latia, ena sini roni le melanga mendon tamata mesa tukuna mesa basuraki ndona vale atambu bana ya bana vakabule wango. Mena vakamuringa vakamatata na wale ni kena Lorena bindu ye chukolom ni koro.
Wana we kanda pini sama ina singa toka ukulani sa somi tokona nomni watataro ababini na kani uni sa wili kasarti nganguri na ilabela bini abuni babulewa kanu itakini na wande utakitiwani vera mai ina singa toka ronra wili katikuni ilabela bini abuni babulewa mepaka tambaki toka na niswe bani singa ni kwa ni sambula kemni
yo tole singa talempa parama
unaka parama nomni taro
aule si watale ti kona tina utambimbi au tanga mbasa kana nenda to so tibeli ungo enu ndon me so me mata tama ibalawa na vitiki na uparta kia ke baka endu na ngone itu ngone tan ni me siril te ngone bi sa wili ti ngone baka baba ye bada bana ngone sara eni sana roni wili talanga me la kona pambula ke baka senga na lawa lava ena taru ko me dur kina ule pambula entu na lawa titia na kambi mbingo enda bitarung takitiko ya matatate takitiko nangono ndawali
nakuna wale ndangai suleti wana turanga bunila mengai so mana taroni pram ndo mandano da dingo legal na Vakekeli Nangauna bora takina Vakekeli rungo dia na radio fijuan dumu ibiti na pongani venu sarabi na FBC TV nonda hulangi te kuna huni lao nonda matintu Attorney General Mr. Sayad Kayum kanda pobnina ni tiu talanga sal niata maina nona boli bola bola mai vitu manitiku o sal niata tiu talanga ola niata robio bugiti ona kena pwandeo takina nonda huni bola karena mebaka sabo madala tigino sala ena nonda ngono sala na taruni parama ukila ni sini bonga tiu kwa ndero mandene ni pwandeo takwa ena nonda ngono
ya binaka taronga chukumayo parama ke baka erawa ni ndo na ngone susu me bola na bol ni kaumbula na tambana ni kana bola na ngone na bol ni kaumbula ana muringa na lao sato kambaleta na kana bola na ngone me berto na matambos ni beterung bunwa
NLC nak parama ni tani sana matata tiga na lao na bodru mindua me baka borita ti kona turanga iji ga bakin vesala vamos risar na nor tu lao na matambos ni beterung bunwa sen NLC mitani sana matata obi kimni nanumni taroya so the question about immunity I think it's also in this constitution can you just elaborate on what is enshrined in this constitution?
The immunity provision is in section 10 or chapter 10 of the Constitution, which begins at section 155.
Chapter 10,
Yes, chapter 10. Now, what that basically says is that there was a immunity given to the people who carried out the 2 coups in 1987. That immunity was put in the 1990 Constitution, and that immunity then was carried on to the 1997 Constitution. And that immunity provision could never be amended. That immunity for the events of 1987 is also included in this Constitution. It also gives immunity for the events of 5 December. So it essentially says that the President, the Prime Minister, the Cabinet Ministers, the members of the RFMF, Fiji Police, Fiji Corrections, Judiciary, Public Service and other public office holders are given immunity. Not just for the events of 5 December, but the subsequent appointments to those positions. But what it also says that these people, both in their official or personal capacity, do not have immunity for crimes like bribery, corruption, murder, rape. Those sorts of things aren't covered. Forgery, so they can still be prosecuted for those crimes, but they cannot be prosecuted for any other offense under the crimes decree. So the rationale or the thinking behind the immunity is like in the 1990 Constitution for the events of 87, is to create the stability. So we starting off on a clean slate, and that's why the immunity provision has been built in. And the second issue relating to immunity is that this provision of the Constitution cannot ever be changed, nor can it be in any way diminished in its application.
So, nangolek na talibon ini sambulo kimni?
Yeah, policy will cast a number, sir.
Nagabilikas ng militar?
I just have one more question for the AG. The current tax law exempt religious organization from paying taxes to the government. So I believe this is discriminatory in nature, because when ordinary workers, ordinary citizens of Fiji are paying tax to the government, while religious organizations who collect large sum of money from members are not are exempted from paying tax. But I don't know, what do you think, and what does the current constitution mention about people who pay tax to the government? Thank you.
Thank you for your question. issues like tax and issues like VAT, they're not addressed in the Constitution. Those sorts of decisions are left to the Parliament to make. And at the moment, as this Constitution provides, what it says is that all the decrees that are in place, all the laws that are in place, continue until the first sitting in Parliament. When the new Parliament sits, they can bring about any laws within the Constitution. They can bring about any laws. So, for example, at the moment, as the Prime Minister last year gave 90.5% of all Fijians tax cuts. It was brought down from 33 all the way down now to 7% for those people earning between $16,000 and $20,000. If the new Parliament comes in and they want to increase the tax or reduce it further, that's their choice. If they want to bring about any other taxes, that's their choice. But those sorts of things aren't addressed in the Constitution as such, because they're policy matters. They're everyday issues. In the same way, we don't say, okay, how much will the bus fare be? But what the Constitution can say is that we need to give everybody access to transportation. Regarding the issue about religious organizations, it's because they're seen to be religious/charitable organizations. That's why there was no taxation as such on them. But that, of course, depends all on the new Parliament and depends on who you elect for. And this is something that you can raise as an issue when people come around campaigning. This is when you raise your concerns with them, and you can ask them what are their policies on it.
No vilkasa ni teknisan sumiti ko nomuni vota taru me kana nomuni taru sa pamadala tigoni kena na punila nanda matintu Attorney General Mr. Sayed Kayum na ngona poruta ki na Vakekeli ndo to manda nanda dingulaleka. Na wale busara numuni borong tiu mai kina radio Fijuan na ngauna boru ta kina Vakekeli ka vulangi tiu weekend na turana punilau nanda matintu na Attorney General aya Sayed Kayum na nanda ngauna ngo. Berni ngai pamadala tiu lai sama ngai borita tiu na kamembala tan na view bangalal taki ko tiu na chapter 10 sana immunity ngai pandau ta tiu. So just one question just regarding immunity, is there any, since immunity has been granted in this constitution, is there any provision that will guarantee that there will be no more coup?
I think that's a very good question, and people ask that. There is a specific provision in this constitution in section 2 that says that no government can be set up, nor can this constitution be abrogated. No government can be set up other than in accordance with this constitution. You can't go off and do something outside this constitution, nor can you abrogate it. It'll be illegal. But the whole notion of stopping coups, etc., is not just one thing. It's a combination of things that stops coups. It's firstly, you have to have an accountable public service, an accountable ministers, accountable prime minister. You need to have transparency, as we see in this constitution. Prime ministers, ministers, senior civil servants, you have to declare their assets and liabilities. You need to also have an electoral system where people feel that their vote has counted. That's why we've got proportional representation, like in Israel, one state, so people feel a sense of ownership into the whole electoral process. You have strong independent institutions, judiciary is independent, electoral commission, human rights, anti-discrimination commission. So it's a combination of things that make the whole culture of coup being stopped. This constitution has a very strong emphasis on socio-economic rights, right to education, water, health, sanitation. So when people feel those issues are being addressed, then it stops also the politicians and other people from coming in to try and create disquiet.
Na wale una nomni borong tiu mai kina ngauna boru ta kina Vakekeli ni sambule kimni?
Yo rata talemba. Na tarung ona nama tarung na kena na nilawa. Tahun ni pulitangan tu sa kina mo. Balik kaya ko nilis na kena wasi wakatuto wata. Endoni tiko na wakatuto takatingo na tamden dalam memaroy. Me zakat talento na krisis merele botane labu. Domanda na bakamadala na nilawa. Me bakandota na tarung buah na kena mata sama-sama me bakarutu.
Eparana is asking about the equal distribution of list as stipulated by the TLTB. He's asking, is it legal? And he's asking because the law says there are trustees to be appointed. They are responsible for distributing the lists. He's asking, is it legal?
I think the law says that there must be equal distribution of lease monies, as was amended.
Yes.
The regulations amended. One of the problems that has been faced is that TLTB did not necessarily have the names of all the members of the landowning unit. And what is in fact, as we speak, is happening is through the Ministry of Itauke Affairs and NLC, all the individual land owning member units are being recorded, all those individuals that belong to the landowning unit. So within 3 months' time, we'll have the list of all the individuals, and in that way, every individual will get their money directly sent to them. That is why in some of the instances you had this trustee situation, because not all the members were identified. So once this is done, it's a major work that's being done, carried out by the government ITC services. Once that is done, then you have all the individual land members that will be given their cards, and they'll get their money put individually into their bank accounts through TLTB.
Na wale wikim ni wata tartiu mai na nonda ngau na boru takina Vakekeli na tulu ruro sa ibadio na rau tulu ruro sa ibadio sa ibandua vitu tulu ruro dio na rau ke na vitu tulu ruro dio sa ibandu. So na suli amanda bi sanla de romanda ni na wandeo tana kamembola tana bi bangalal takina immunity na pakai tuntingo na chapter tini na nonda ya buni mabulu mabu.
Nakana wasitini eba madal taki chukana be bangalal taki. En rukuni wasitini ya esa bakamata taki chuko ni na be bangalal taki etoka ena yabuni bakabulewani na ena maina tin kadio wal sangul kabitu katiko ena yabuni bakabulewani tin kadio dio sangabulu kena tin kadio dio sangul kabitu ena tomani tikunga ena rukuni yabuni bakabulewango. Go mena lore chiko ni nakena tu binakana nonda bonua nakena sa nakena birkotoria na tikinan 255 na wasitini todoko yo na beba ngalal tengo ena sini wakakina na basulawa kapa madal takena dikrini basulawa ronondolu kadhiwa. Oka kena kebaka endua mbei takina kudu sembutako na sini bangalal tek mekina. Bamadal tek chunga na wasitini na kake de toka mena yabuni bakulewana tin kadio dio sangabulu tin kadio dio sangabulu kabitu sama toman tunga ena rukuni yabuni bakulewango.
Na boleh besar salah ni sambul bina kimni? Ni boleh bina na nomni taru na edamuni?
Usaki usango iraki.
Bina kasaki usak nomni taru.
Taru ngabu ana bertuna nonto bulang ina kabingo. Bala tangan nanggele. Zabunda kana norto nanu mana bukuni ni umbula tu na lomaningele. Nonto na Itauke. Heranda kan irto jualan ana visa utakan merto sawa sukarata udo seranga bakan dua nanggele. Ibir na Itauke ningele. Maina kana ndau soli tunga ya ono na fiti ya tulu na fiti maina ngau na tibukina na anda buni babulu asal tibukina na matari tumi alo maingo anda ngaran utar.
Sakiusa from Rakiraki is asking about the mineral resources. It's below under 6 feet. Can you just briefly elaborate on that, Mr. Minister?
Sure. Cookie, we received a lot of submissions on this. People felt very strongly, and rightfully so, that for a period of time, as you saw, for example, in Vatukola, there's a lot of history behind that as to how that land was alienated. There's a 999-year lease that was given. That the landowners need to get a fair share of the royalties, anything below 6 feet, and in fact that has been incorporated into the constitution. And I remember there's a gentleman also in Rakiraki. Who made the submission. I don't know if he's the same Vilikesa. But what this constitution says is that should there be anything found, any minerals or gas found on land or in the seabed area that is under communal ownership, then any royalties that are paid to the state, the landowners must get a fair share of that. Till today, nobody's received a fair share of the royalties. In Vanuatu, there's been some additional payments that have been made with the bauxite mining, but overall there's never been any share being paid. Government has taken all the money. And what this does is says government must pay a fair share of it to the landowners. So it's a very good incentive. It also recognizes the land ownership and gives it a lot more meaning and substance in practical terms.
Ibina ka sekiusa ke wani borong timai au kla ni sa somiti gona nomni na vina ka temena pande otamba ngosal na kame saba madala tigena na punila wa na nondanga nongo.
Naka na vakangani saba madala takana bunilawa na ke ni reta na tikina tulsang bulu e saba matateki chikina ni ke baka na matentu e baka yang taka na yaumbula e chiktal nga be kenda na ito kenan dondono me menda wase may bana na ilabo e rao may ban kena bantek na yaumbula ya.
Sa matataya sa kiusa na ipa madala me baka sa warita kini sa tutalanga en nonda buni wabulunga abe tal no taitiko en ngaunongo. Ia bikim ni nakanda vina wali usara no muni warong timai sa mai dava na ngauna waru takina Vakekeli enda poblu na tiku wana nonda bulangi na turana bunilawa kanui takitiko. Members of the public will make their submission again or
we want to get feedback from them in respect of the translation.
Right, okay.
Because I know there are some phraseologies that have been used. So they've got the English and they've got the vernacular. So they want anything explained in that sense about the translation. If they think there's a better word, to replace. Maybe Sala can very quickly tell you a story about, the difference about tried. Just very quickly.
Iya, na nit kita takapchuna kya na babandeo taki, endo tan na kya na bandeo nga bandono may na bandeo bakalawa. Kona right of a person na tried, not to be tried. Changi toka na kya na bamadala. Kona babandeo kita wa, matini babandeo kita wa tora, boleh tu nga me kuanin do na tamata me tobolea. Iyo dondono me vele waitaki. Iyo, kona ndui ni wasa bantaki. Iyo tried wabi te tobolea nga. Iyo na was dondono na vele waitaki.
Iyo epi kenda na buwarong atiko. Ni alo binasar ni turin do ni labela binabu ni wabula ni wilika. Kaya ni nanuma ni tu koto kine sone viso. How will they make this the feedback? Where will they?
They can do it to the Attorney General's chambers. We're in fact putting out phone numbers. They can call Laite and Sala. We put out various other numbers where people can call or they can email or they can even text in terms of querying that. And we've put out those numbers and some of the numbers will be put out in the next couple of days.
Na kainda na dakawa na kene pondewa ni wilika ni nangai tunitigo na mboni telefoni na nona poni bolo na Attorney General sen wunilaw ni matimtu moni na bori tamiki na boibe na bobandewa ni nonda vuni mabule wabu me basabi kuya katamba kitiko na nonda ngongo na bobinu na bona turanga na Attorney General. Thank you very much for your time, sir.
Thank you
and
very
your
much.
offices na boli usala wakini vi laite to sarti wali wona kana bonde taki na boli vi kimni na boronti mai ni kakuni ngule daba na nomu ni nomu me soliti mai en na ibo bonde obo ni nonda vuni mabule wa sa tamba gitu en nonda ngongo sana daba tala kana ngono boru taki na Vakekeli.